Good morning. For those of you in the back who are still grabbing coffee, there are still plenty of seats up front. So if you'd like to fill in seats, please let us know. If we need a few extra chairs, we'll make that happen for you as well. Welcome. And good morning. My name is Karen Reardon, and I'm the President and CEO of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, and happy to be hosting Lieutenant Governor Evette this morning, as well as a number of other elected leaders that we'd like to welcome to start off this morning. We have Mayor Brenda Bethune from the City of Myrtle Beach here with us today. We also have Heather Ammons Crawford, our state representative, here today. As delegates. Welcome. We have Chairman Johnny Gardner from Horry County Council here this morning. He is joined by his colleague Tyler Servant, also of Horry County Council, and Mr. Gary Loftus of Horry County Council. Welcome. We're also pleased to welcome Celia Urquhart from Senator Graham's office here this morning. And I hope I didn't miss anyone else that may have popped in. But welcome to everyone. We have members of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce's board here with us today, as well as several board members from Coast RTA, and just members of the business community. And our purpose, our mission is actually quite simple this morning, and it's really just to focus on transit. I was fortunate enough to go to a symposium that the Lieutenant Governor held to sort of kick this topic off in the fall. And Brian from Coast RTA was there with me, and several other business people from the Myrtle Beach area, as well as throughout the entire Palmetto State. And it was a great discussion about where we are, what's working, what may need to be done, what the future looks like. And so the suggestion was that we would do these regionally throughout our state, so that we could really dive in and talk about the topic as it relates to us in Horry County and Myrtle Beach area, and then hopefully be able to come all back together and compare notes, hear what Greenville had to say, hear what Charleston had to say, Columbia, throughout the state. But today is really about our community, what's on our minds, and so we're going to ask you to have some questions ready and have a little bit of a discussion so that our Lieutenant Governor can hear what's on your minds and, again, what your ideas are for the future. I'd like to also welcome today, in addition to Brian Pasaic from Coast RTA, we have Sarah Cohen from the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce here with us, and she's going to be part of our agenda. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the board of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber this year. And he started in 2020, Mr. Steve Mays, President and CEO of Founders Golf International.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for taking time out of your day to be with us today on this Mass Transit Symposium. It should be a great morning of discussion, and we're looking forward to it. And I have the distinct honor of introducing our special guest today. Pamela Evette of Traveler's Rest was elected as the 93rd Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina in November of 2018. She's the first female Republican Lieutenant Governor in our state's history. Prior to her life in public office, Lieutenant Governor Evette founded Quality Business Solutions, a payroll, human resources, and benefit services firm headquarters here in South Carolina. Under Evette's leadership, Quality Business Solutions went from a startup to earning a spot on Inc. magazine's list of our nation's fastest growing businesses. In just a little over a year in public office, Lieutenant Governor Evette has already made a name for herself as someone who is willing to travel the state to work on tough issues like flood remediation, litter control, and education reform. And she is also a strong proponent of Interstate 73. Today she joins us to talk about another important priority in our state, mass transit. So without further wait, please help me welcome the 93rd Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, Pamela Evette.
So it's wonderful to be down here in Myrtle Beach. I'm very excited to hear what everybody's input is on this subject matter. As this Lieutenant Governor, I have the extreme honor of being able to travel the state. Lieutenant governors before me sat in the Senate and presided over that for 5 months of the year. I'm really happy I don't do that. I like our senators, they do a great job. But sitting there waiting for the tie-breaking vote, I don't think is what I was meant to do. But my job is to travel around the state, talk to businesses, talk to teachers, talk to leaders, and find out what we're doing well and what we need to make improvements on. And that's what the governor has charged me to do. So last year was kind of like drinking from a fire hose, right? I was learning a lot about what was going on. South Carolina is a really small state, but different parts of the state have completely separate needs. So in talking to business, I kept hearing over and over the need for a stable workforce, and that had a lot to do with transportation and public transportation. And how do we improve on it? So the more I heard that, the more I started hearing from healthcare providers that talked about mass transit and public transportation and how we're going to keep our citizens well, and how we're going to move them around. So out of those conversations came an idea to have a symposium in Columbia last year to talk about public transportation. And at first we thought, well, we'll kind of get some transit people from all over the state, and before we knew it, it had gotten bigger than itself. So we capped it at 57 people. SCETV put it on TV so everybody who couldn't attend could see what was going on, and it turned out to be a really great day. You know, when I invited a lot of our legislators and a lot of our business people, I kept hearing, is this going to be a 2-hour talk on light rail? Are we going to keep hearing just about light rail? And I said, well, no. I want us to always talk about big projects that have big goals at the end, right? But there's a lot of things that we could do today to make the lives of our workers and our business owners easier. And I wanted to make sure that we were all involved in that conversation, because that's what I learned. So I sat down with these 2 great women in Greenbelt who came out of the healthcare industry and got on the transportation board, and started to realize that there was a lot of little things that we could do as a community that would make public transportation better today. So while we were thinking about light rail, while we were thinking about mass transit, while we were thinking about all the other ideas that take time, we could still be making improvements today. And that's why we're all here. So I'm excited to be here. We did the first one in Charleston, because out of that meeting in Columbia, I thought, well, who could we get to keep driving this forward? So as a business owner for years, I wanted to make sure that it didn't end in one conversation, right? We all get frustrated when we have one great conversation and then it seems to kind of die. Nobody knows who to take the ball and keep running with it. So the chamber was really the best partner to partner up to keep this discussion moving forward and to keep pulling business and the ideas of business into the conversation. So I challenged the chamber, and they have done a great job bringing everybody together. We're doing it regionally around the state, and we will send out a report to everybody to kind of figure out what everybody else is doing, because stealing somebody else's idea is okay in this arena. And that's what we're finding out, is that they're doing some really neat things in Greenville that maybe somebody hasn't thought about implementing somewhere else. And I saw that with Charleston, and how they're doing with ride-sharing ideas. Restaurants, I met a group of restaurant owners at a hospitality conference in Charleston, where they talked about how they on their own have banded together and are moving 700 workers a week from one general location to downtown restaurants, so they can keep people off the road. They can get a workforce there that maybe doesn't have reliable transportation. But on their own, they came together with this great idea, and they're moving 700 employees a week, just from an idea of a few people together. So those are ideas I want to be able to bring to other parts of the state, to make sure that you're benefiting from the trials and errors and the successes that they're having everywhere else. So I want to thank the chamber for keeping this moving around the state. I want to thank your local chamber, because they do such a great job, and our elected leaders who are all here, because we all have a vested interest. Team South Carolina is very real. We talk about it all the time, but we really should be proud of how we all work together from a federal, state, and local level to make sure that we're doing the best things, the most impactful things we can be doing for the business and the citizens of South Carolina. So be very proud of who you've sent to Columbia, who you've sent to Washington, and who you've put in your local offices, because they are really making all the difference. And I know that, because when I sit with the other 49 lieutenant governors from across the country, they're definitely envious of what's happening here in South Carolina. So with that, I'm gonna open, and keep the conversation moving, but I'm excited to hear your ideas, what you think we're doing good and what you think we need to make some changes on. And you have a great representation of state and local and federal leaders here that will be able to take those ideas and try to make them work for you. Thank you so much for coming this morning.
For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Brian Piasek. I'm the General Manager, CEO of CoastRTA here in the Myrtle Beach, Conway, Georgetown County area. I was thinking this morning that the most nervous I've been before a presentation, I was testifying before the Indiana State Legislature on a very similar topic, talking about the benefits of transit and why transit is a tool in the toolbox that we need to consider investing in. And the reason why I'm nervous is because this is the most important presentation I've made since I've been here. My 5th year anniversary will be May 15th. The last 5 years have been fraught with a lot of efforts by me and my staff and my board, cleaning up what we do, making sure that we're compliant with federal regulations, and putting the best damn bus service that we could put on the street for the money that we had. And that's something that we focused on. And this forum that the Lieutenant Governor has provided for me, I can't be more appreciative, and thank everybody in this room for the time and effort for coming here today, and certainly hope that I can convince you that transit is something that our region needs to invest in, and that CoastRTA is the team to do it. We're ready to grow, and I'm extremely excited about the future. Let me talk a little bit about the past. When I got here, actually, first thing is when the board decided to hire me in March of 2015, I had to come to town and go through the inquisition that I will call the Board of County Council. And I'll never forget, Councilman Worley asked me, Brian, you're gonna come here in May, what's the first thing you're gonna do? Well, Councilman Worley, I'm gonna find some buses, because that's what we do, and we gotta have buses in order to provide the service that we provide. And so, when I got here in June, the first thing we did is we sent 24, what I would call glorified paperweights, to Don's Car Crushing, and brought 10 of these buses here in the middle that you see, the yellow buses from the Dallas area rapid transit, which is where I moved from. I came here from Dallas. I knew these buses. I used to ride these buses to work a couple days a week. I knew they'd been taken care of, and we were able to do a federal transfer of those assets. So all I had to do to get 10 buses was pay DART $50,000 for their local interest in there. So basically $5,000 per bus to get them here. And they really did save our bacon. They really did. And since then, we've been able to buy these new flyers down here in the lower hand corner, $450,000 a piece. We got 2 last month that were the first 2 to replace those 2 of those Dallas buses. So we're really already starting to flip the fleet. My kids were really stoked about the buses from Dallas. My middle son, Ian, actually rode those buses with me one day to work. So they were pretty happy. They've gotten a lot bigger since then. Another rude awakening when I got here in 2015 is, oh yeah, CoastRTA is also responsible for evacuation in the event of emergencies. And I'm like, what? It's like, I knew the equipment that we had was substandard, and as you can see, this is from Brown Swamp. The National Guard went in flooding after Matthew into Brown Swamp to get some folks out of some flooded areas, and we were there to pick them up to take them to shelters and other places. And unfortunately, we've had way too much practice with the whole evacuation thing here in Horry and Georgetown County. So I feel like we've shored up our efforts. We have the reliable equipment, and we stand ready to support those first responders and emergency management staff and city and county staff with whatever comes up. And I have a pretty good comfort level, although you never know what contingencies around the corner to help. But this is certainly an honor for us to serve the community in this role. So since then, we've actually flipped our fleet. I have 6 trolleys and two transit buses that haven't been replaced since I've been here. So we operate 36 vehicles, and we've got all different types, but we've really started to shore up the reliability of our system, and now we're even experimenting with smaller vehicles. Our paratransit system, the cutaways we use are about 10 miles per gallon. Well, this vehicle up here in the upper left gets about 16 or 17, so it's helping us conserve costs. And I want to thank SCDOT, Horry County, Georgetown County, all came to the table with some funding so that we can make these bus purchases and really improve the reliability of our system. And so it was really fun going back a year after that conversation with Councilman Worley about, we've been here a year or so, and I was able to say, look, just because we got buses, we had happier mechanics, we had happier drivers, and we had happier passengers. The biggest problem with those DART buses is that people are falling asleep because they're so comfortable. They're suburban coaches, the seats recline. And so it was really that simple to improve the morale of the system throughout the system, as well as improving our maintenance practices. No more baling wire, no more spit, no more duct tape. We actually change out engines now. We change out turbos, we change out air conditioning units, fix them on the side so that we can get the bus running back in service and be ready to replace the next one. So it's really improved the consistency and the efficiency of our service. While those capital projects were happening, we've made some service improvements in April of 2016. We actually took buses off of Ocean Boulevard, put them on Kings Highway, which does not sit well with some of our passengers, but it totally improved our on-time performance. We went from like 65% on-time performance to 90% on-time performance, which is critical for our system because it's what's called a pulse system. All of our buses meet at our double wide there across from City Hall and exchange passengers and then go back out into the region. So really important that we stay on time. The only addition to the routes that we've made was an SC Works grant, Access to Jobs grant, where we started service to Loris and Bucksport. And we've added more frequent service to the airport. And those realignments really shored up the on-time performance and reliability of the system. We've made a number of investments behind the scenes. We started an app so people can see where our buses are in real time. Critical when you're only operating on an hourly basis. I mentioned our double wide. That building there you see in the upper right-hand corner is our transit center. It provides a climate-controlled place for people to wait at basically the center of our universe, where 7 of our 10 routes that we operate actually get to this facility at one point in time during the day. And the city of Myrtle Beach built this for us. It's an important investment and certainly improved the morale of our passengers and gave them some place to wait while they're waiting for the bus. We've shored up our public information. You see our system map and our shuttle program flyer that is at all of the resorts. And then finally, we started a bus stop sign program. Up until last year, our system was completely operated using a flag stop system, meaning that if you're on our route, you flag the bus down and it stops. That means the passengers are actually dictating the locations where they're accessing our system, not necessarily a safe proposition. So we've gone through our system. We've implemented 3 routes in Myrtle Beach. We're starting on Route 16, which operates between Myrtle Beach and Georgetown, to place locations where we can dictate where people are getting on our system. Enhances their safety. It also gives us visibility on the street. Somebody out there walking around sees a bus stop sign, actually understands now that we have a bus system, and maybe check us out on our website or something like that. And then finally, it gives us data. We know where people are getting on, and we can start placing street furniture, shelters, and other amenities for our passengers where they're using the system the most. And then one other thing I want to mention is we've upgraded a software throughout our agency. We're truly out of the 90s now, I'd say. But one major implementation was a new scheduling software for our paratransit system. And we've doubled our productivity on that system. We've gone from 0.84 passengers per hour to 1.5 passengers per hour, which doesn't sound like much, but that is the industry average for an ADA paratransit system, to getting those with disabilities around our system. So how do I know all these efforts have worked? The proof is in the pudding. 32% increase in ridership with very little increases in service over the course of the last 5 years. And we're on track for beating that 544,000 in FY20. Every month, if we compare this month to that same month last year, we've got a 4 to 8% increase in ridership, and that's simply because those who are using our system know it's going to be there, and they use it more often, and then we get new riders because obviously the word spreads. So hopefully that convinces you that we know how to do transit. We do have it's a small system, 14 bus pullout, but on fixed route, but it works well, and people are using it. We're small, but we're also complicated. We're actually 2 systems in one. We have an urban system, which is about 2/3 of our service, and a rural system, which is about 1/3 of the service. And this is all the different funding sources that we use to cobble together in order to pull that off. All of these sources are basically on the backs of residents. I think it's important to understand that even our federal dollars come to us by virtue of population. We could run 15 buses or we could run 50 buses. We're still going to get basically the same amount of money from FTA. And all of these, up until 2018, all of these local funds have been discretionary. So we have to go to each of these local governments and ask for the money on an annual basis, which is a really difficult way to run transit, because if you want to try to start something new, and there's no prospect or there's no guarantee that that money you're getting from one source is going to be there next year, the worst thing you can do in transit is start a route and then pull it off the street. It just doesn't work, and you lose your credibility in the community. In July of 2018, both counties assigned $6.50 of the road use fee, $6.50 per registered vehicle, the road use fee collected in these counties. And this is a huge sea change for us. It gave us, not only did it increase the amount of money that we got from the local governments, but it gave us a funding source that actually had a little bit of growth. We have a little better capability of dealing with inflationary costs. And we'll be able to grow, a little bit, not a lot, over the course of the next few years. It also reduces our dependence on federal dollars for operating costs. Those federal monies come to us; they never get bigger. Even when our population increases, other regions' populations increase, and so you still have very little chance of getting major increases in those federal dollars. So it's important that we're able to use those for other expenses other than operating, because with 5307, which is our urban program, you actually get the year it's allocated plus 5 to spend the money. So it makes sense to pool those resources over time and make decided capital investments into your system. We've been trying to turn over every rock for additional funding. You see these 2 buses on the side. We use advertising on the buses to help augment our service, and we make about $40,000 to $50,000 a year in doing advertising on our buses. This one on the bottom you probably can't see. That was actually, we did 2 buses for the SC Works program through a grant that they received for advertising and other job programs. So they've been a really good partner on a lot of fronts. The last investment that we really need to make before we grow is we need to replace our facilities. This building in the middle here is a 1950s Ford dealership. Used to be Huff Ford, or started with an H. It was obsolete the day we opened it. You can't lift a bus inside. As you can see this picture on the bottom, they work on the buses outside in the rain, in the heat, but we can't lift them inside, get underneath them. That building there in Conway also has a passenger facility. We're going to need to replace our double wide here in Myrtle Beach, and we've got 2 shelters on the side of the road in Georgetown for passenger handling facilities. So we've been able to assemble $1 million to start a facility development program. We've already selected the consultant for that. We're going to start it sometime next month, and that study will help us figure out what the best location is, program those facilities, what functions need to go into each one of those facilities, get them environmental clearance, and get them as far down the design road that we can so that we can put together a killer application for federal funds to actually construct them. So I would like to get these completed within the next 5 years. So that's a pretty hefty investment. Probably, if we're going to do it right, close to $20 million to do it. So that's something that we really need to get done before we truly can grow. So now you get my elevator speech. And it's all about targeting the size of the system for the region that we're in. If you look at any region, or look at the regions in the United States with populations of 250 to 400,000, on average, those transit systems pull out 50 buses. We pull out 14. If you look at any region's 550,000 in population to 750,000 population, which is what we are in any given summer day, those systems pull out 120. So if I really want to move the needle in this region, we need to invest in transit to get at least between those 2 numbers. And there's a lot of opportunities out there where we can get people out of their cars. We can get tourists around the parking issues, and a lot of other things, especially along the coast, where we could move a lot of people. So I have some numbers. There's probably no way anybody can see this, but I just had a couple of comparisons that I wanted to make to 3 systems in South Carolina, looking at Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston. Some of my fellow transit folks have their challenges, but you can see pretty decidedly how things are different. First of all, I would like to try to get, well, first of all, we've got Greenlink in Greenville, Columbia and Comet in Columbia, Carter in Charleston, and I picked Daytona because even though that region is a little bit bigger than ours, they have a very similar service style. They have a lot of service along the coast, and then they have a lot of service into Deltona, which is about 20 miles inland, like Conway. So service-wise, they have a lot of the same issues that we have. But these 3 of these systems, Columbia, Charleston, and Comet, have dedicated funding sources. Charleston and Columbia have sales tax, and they use property taxes, I think, in Daytona, which is kind of an interesting. They also get quite a bit of help from the state. They get about $4 million a year from the state. That was something that we would love to get as well. But I think that this really shows some interesting things here. One is those systems that do have dedicated funding are not using their federal dollars as much for operating. You can see those percentages, 16 to 28% for those 3 systems. Greenville, who's probably a good 2 years ahead of us in this discussion in terms of investing in transit, is still at a point where they're at 50%, using 50%, or 50% of their operating costs are being covered by federal dollars. And that's really no way to go through life as a transit agency. And then secondly, 3 to 4 times the funding generates 4 to 5 times the buses going out in service every day, 5 to 6 times the ridership. And I promise you, if we can put the service out there like that, we'll get those types of riders as well. So what are we moving forward on? I think one of the issues for us is we always sort of try to balance service area with frequency in the transit game. And for us, the way we're funded, we really try to shoot for service area and give anybody that needs the service access. One thing that the road use fee has done for us is it's pushed us to open new conversations with areas of the region that don't currently have service. North Myrtle Beach, Sockasty, southern parts of Georgetown County, because they all now have skin in the game. Everybody in those regions, and those parts of the regions are those parts of the region have are contributing to that road use fee. So what's really complicated is I have to go to the Myrtle Beaches and the Conways of the world and say, look, if I'm going to provide service in these other areas, I actually need more money from you because I need to spread our federal resources and our other formula funds across a wider range of service. So it's an extremely complicated conversation. It doesn't sit well with a lot of politicians, I will say. But I think by couching it such that, look, we're just trying to grow around the fringes here for the next 5 years until we can get to a referendum and actually get off of everybody's dole. If I can get some support, there's a lot of different things that we can do. I know that the city of North Myrtle Beach is considering a proposal for us to start an entertainment shuttle-like service up there this summer, and then doing a route from Myrtle Beach to North Myrtle Beach has been a long time coming. We stopped service in North Myrtle Beach in 2006, and they're going to bring additional funding to the table, which was critical for making sure that Myrtle Beach knew that they were getting service but still kicking in. So, that sort of funding, service, balance, equity, whatever you want to call it, was critical to these conversations. And I'm hopeful that the time limit that we're putting on, it's like, look, if we can just fight this for a couple of years until we get to a different funding mix, then there's a lot of benefits that we can actually illustrate by being able to put some additional service out on the street. And so I'll leave you with our vision. If we were funded at basically the same level as Daytona, we could do a 50 to 60 bus commuter bus system that would operate year-round. We would have what I call a Grand Strand connector service, basically connecting the dots from Little River down to Georgetown with 30-minute bus service, and stopping in each one of those general area, each one of those centers, and meeting up with circulator services that distribute and collect people. And then even adding a little bit of shoulder season service, because obviously things don't shut down here on Labor Day, or they start up before Memorial Day for sure. A regional demand response system for the elderly and disabled. There are 62 different federal programs outside of the Federal Transit Administration that provide transportation to what you would call human service clients. But there are so many gaps. Just, being able to go to the hairdresser, or, there's trip purpose gaps, there's temporal gaps, there's geographic gaps. The seniors are our fastest growing population in the region, and it makes sense to give them some mobility freedom similar to what we have. And then we can also do some steel wheel options. I'm not sure how far down the road we can get on that, but if Kenosha, Wisconsin can build a retro trolley in their area, then sure as heck Myrtle Beach can. And I think we could catalyze some development. We can create some activity centers that the cities are looking for with some steel wheel short trolleys. And then, if we really want to get crazy, we can try to do a regional rail program on a rail line that parallels our busiest corridor. These are all possibilities. They're ways out right now, but they're something that I've been spending about 20 years of my life pre-Coast RTA developing systems like that one in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We can do it, and I think I hope that I've given you guys some food for thought and a better understanding of Coast RTA's capabilities. And with that, I will close.
I'm by no means a transportation expert, but we've done several, actually this is our second meeting we've done so far of these regional transportation meetings. I want to first thank the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce for all the wonderful work that y'all have done putting this together. You've made it very easy on both our office at the South Carolina Chamber and at the Lieutenant Governor's office as well to plan these. And we're very excited about these meetings across the state. I think it's very interesting what we've seen so far, just the two of us, and the difference between what Charleston is facing and what Myrtle Beach is facing in Horry County as a whole. But one of the things that came out of our Charleston meeting, and this is one of the wonderful things about y'all being not the first, is that you get some of the benefit of what we learned in Charleston, is the conversation of affordable workforce housing came up. And so after talking to Jimmy and some of the other staff, we realized we really need to bring that discussion into these meetings. We can't have a full conversation about transit without talking about affordable workforce housing. So my goal for the next 2 minutes is just to bring that into the conversation. I don't have a solution, but I wanted to bring that up so that we can have, as we open it up to more discussion, that's on everybody's minds as well. One thing that I did want to bring up is that there is a statewide bill in Columbia right now at the State House that would address some of these issues. It's H3998, and I wanted to thank Representative Heather Crawford for being here. She's a co-sponsor of that bill. That bill has passed the House and is now in the Senate. Basically what it does, it gives a state low income, I think it gives a state tax credit if you receive a federal low income housing tax credit. So it would create a sort of sister tax credit on the state level that you would already receive on the federal level. And we're really excited about that. We believe it's gonna help the workforce and senior citizens, two groups that are very important to this area of the state for sure. But again, thank you, Representative Crawford, for co-sponsoring that bill. And it's actually made it through and is sitting on the Senate floor right now. If you've not followed what's going on in the Senate, it might be quite some time before we actually get a vote on it, but we're really excited. It passed the House last year and it's made it through finance and sitting on the Senate floor, but we'll see when that actually gets a vote. But we're really excited about that bill and hopeful that that will alleviate some of the concerns. One of the things that we hear, what the chamber does every year, we go around the state to local chambers. We do it with Myrtle Beach Chamber and North Myrtle Beach Chamber. We ask y'all, and the people who come to these events, what your biggest concerns are in the next coming years. And one of the things that we've heard for the last several years is affordable housing for your employees. And what we hear oftentimes is it's not necessarily what we normally think of when we think of affordable housing. It's our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters who are no longer able to live in the communities that they teach in and they police in. And not only does that create a dissonance between the community you're serving and the community that you live in, but it also puts hardship on our roads. Especially, we heard in the Charleston area, we have people driving from an hour away. And I'm sure y'all have similar issues here, but we heard that happening in Charleston. Obviously, again, that creates a dissonance between the community that you're policing in, the community that you're living in. We want those typically to be the same, so you have a buy-in, right? But the other thing is it puts a hardship on our roads, which I think everybody in this room would agree are not the best. So putting extra hardship on them is probably not the best. So it really, you can't have a conversation about transit without having a conversation about where people are living. And I'll leave with one fact before we open it up to the whole group to discuss this. This is a nationwide statistic, not a South Carolina statistic, but we know on average, a household relies primarily on cars, spends about 25% of their monthly income on transit. Conversely, households that are located in areas where there are high mobility options, where there's lots of ways for them to use transportation other than cars, only spend about 9% of their income on transit. So when we're talking about helping those teachers, police officers who are already living on a fixed, but senior citizens who are living on a fixed budget, this really becomes a real issue of economic development and helping people all across the state. So I'll leave y'all with that, but wanted to bring that up before we have a discussion about all the different ways that we can make transit better in Horry County and obviously throughout the entire state. Thank you.
All right. So, one thing I want to add, because it came up in Charleston too, when Sarah started talking about points that came up. And we're facing this on a lot of fronts with a lot of different things. You know, the governor and I have been shouting from the rooftops about our vocational schools and how for so long we looked at our vocational schools and our tech colleges as a second tier option for our youth, right? So by nature, they were deterred from looking at those and exploring those areas of education. Well, we're facing the same thing when it comes to public transportation and affordable housing. We need, as leaders in the community, to change the concept, the idea of what people view that as. So when we talk about public transportation, it used to be, people would think of public transportation as, oh, well, that's for people who are low paid, low income, that's not for me. I have a vehicle. But the demographic is really changing. You know, we have millennials who don't want to own cars, who want to be a one-car family and look for public transportation to get them around. You have the elders in our society who want to stay independent, but maybe don't feel so safe on the roads anymore, and so they want to attract public transportation. So we all, as leaders, have to change the idea of what that face is of the person riding public transportation. And the same thing with workforce housing, like you heard Sarah mention. You know, when you think of workforce housing, people think of low-cost housing. Well, that's not the same thing. Workforce housing are where the firefighters live, where your police, where the teachers that are teaching our kids, or the favorite waitress you have at a local restaurant who serves you every week when you go in. That's the face of workforce housing. And it's up to all of us to get people to change how we look at this so that they can really address the problem and become vested in the problem. We don't want to take anybody away from these conversations. So when we can make it real in all of our lives, it just gets more and more people to the table. Something that you said really well that came up also in Charleston is the dignity of riding public transportation. That goes with my first point, right? How we all view riders of public transportation, but it's also how those facilities look. We want to make sure that people are out of the rain. We want to make sure that they feel safe, that they're well lit. People want to go to those places and use them if they feel safe using it. So as leaders, we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe and dry and encouraging. And so thank you for what you've done with that, because I know that was a point that you brought up in Columbia, was making sure that DOT knows. And I was so happy at that Columbia meeting because we tried to bring all the right players to the table. We had representatives and business, but we had SCDOT. And I think one big point that came out of that meeting was sometimes nobody tells SCDOT where they want a bus stop. So they take a section of road and they repave it, and nobody tells the people that are repaving, we need to have a bus stop here, until after it's done. And Christy Hall she said, that's very easy to do in the planning stage. It's not costly, it's not difficult at all. But it is once everything's paved, and you have to bring the crew out, and you have to cut concrete. Now it becomes a big problem. So bringing all the right people to the table, and SCDOT has been very supportive of what we want to do. Sometimes I think because we are in the process of really improving our roads, sometimes SCDOT has, poor Christy Hall, I always say, she just might as well put a big bullseye on her chest. But she does a great job making sure that everything she does is completely transparent and really wanting to work with the community. So one good thing that the governor always says, and I like to add at all these discussions, and I'm sure Christy would say the same thing if she was here, don't assume we know. Don't assume any of us know what you're facing unless you tell us. So that's why this is so important. So with that, I want to open it up for suggestions, what you're doing, what you'd like to see be done. You have local leaders here, you have state leaders. Let us know where is your pain? or something that you're doing that you think has really made a difference, that we can kind of put in this report and share it with the other urban areas around the state.
We all know you're not a shy group.
I know, come on guys.
First.
It's hard for the first question, and then I'll get rolling.
I'll start for you.
Thanks,
Brian, we've come a long way since I met you in 2015, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff, good stuff. You've got your own symposium now. We couldn't even get a meeting with anybody to even talk about transportation at the time. And fortunately, we went around to all the councils and the cities and got buy-ins, and of course, county council really stepped up to the plate. Of course, it came with some pain too, as you said a minute ago. People don't realize for years and years and years, as Brian said, transportation had to come before county council to even get any funding, and they didn't know from year to year what county council was sitting there, what would actually give them funding. So we came up with a formula, and we found out, and this is something that you can take back to some of the other governments, is that legally we found you can't use property taxes. But you can use your road fee, which we had implemented. Now, that gave us some pain for our citizens because we did increase the road fee from $30 to $50. I never imagined we would get county council to go along with that, but they did. And then we took $6.50 based off of Brian's recommendation, which would fund their operations. And then it was something that was growth. And they always wanted a stable fund of dollars to be able to fund them. So we were able to take that, and because of that, he's been able to do all these other things, because he didn't have to worry about that stable amount of money for operations. He could go use federal monies and other monies to grow and buy these buses. So that's been a great thing. I'll tell you from a business person standpoint, I fought very hard the last couple of years. Our business, we were going to buy our own bus. I've got a lot of J1 Visa and other people that were walking. And I was watching them walk down 21st and 29th Avenue in the rain. I was watching them walk in the middle of the night. They were going through Broadway. They were going down to the boulevard where they were living. And I knew personally, as a business owner, that wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for my employees, number one. Number two, I don't think it was a good image for the city of Myrtle Beach or Horry County either, if anything was to happen because of these young girls and young men and women that are having to walk that far and do that. So we were going to buy our own bus. Fortunately, I talked to Brian about it, and we were able to work out and extend the entertainment shuttle. We funded. I took the monies that I was going to spend. It didn't come free, so if I don't think they just gave me something, we pay for it. We have marketing agreements, and so they took that idea, and that marketing agreement went to all the other entities throughout Broadway, which Broadway at the beach participates, Resorts participates, I think down on the south end, Family Kingdom and some others throughout, other hotel entities also that have the same thing. We were able to get the stop over here at the city with the city stepping in. Fox, I think, really headed that program, and we're able to, and it's magnificent what's happening. But what we did is we gave transportation, even the kids that ride their bicycles to work, late at night when they want to go home, we have bike racks on front of them. They put their bike and then they can ride safely home. When it's raining, they can get in a bus and ride safely back to where they are. And then it also gives them transportation when they're here visiting us as workers to go around to, the shop and dine and do things that the kids want to do. What I want to leave you with is you say, well, that's all, J1 and that's workers and things like that. He picked up 70,000 riders this year in the entertainment shuttle alone. That's huge of what they're doing, bringing people to the different attractions and hotels around the Myrtle Beach area. Don't look at it as those were dollars that were spent. Look at the return on investment that we're going to get. And I don't think, Ryan, we've ever done a study, maybe Coastal could do it or the city could do it. All those people that are riding the bus are spending money somewhere. When they spend that money, that's a hospitality fee. That's a tax, a sales tax, accommodations tax, or something that those people are spending. So we're getting a return on our investment for the money that you're investing into public transportation also, so that's a good means of calculating how much more. I was talking to Fox earlier, and I'm glad I've got this audience. I'll implore all of you, please put more money into it this next year. Brian wants to expand it, make it bigger for more of the attractions. People are riding it, they're using it. I see tourists on it every day that are coming to the attractions to utilize it. And then down Sarah Point, workforce. We need work housing, and we need affordable housing, as you just described. And we're all for that, but we gotta have transportation for them, dependable transportation. I think Brian and his group and their whole board of directors has really stepped up and done a fantastic job making that happen, but we got a long ways to go. Anything the Chamber of Commerce can do to help, because it helps everybody that's a member of that, with your membership, it helps us all, and it's doing good things. And Brian, I mean, when we first started this thing in 2015, I mean, people laughed at us and said, oh, nobody will ever ride the buses, it's no good. It's a corrupt system, it's blah, blah, blah. Well, Brian Piazak and his team have turned that around, and our thought of public transportation has totally turned, and y'all are doing a great job, and I think our governments really need to continue to support that. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for putting this together. This is very meaningful for our community.
Thank you, Mark. It really is. This directly affects business. Getting your employees to work is crucial to be able to open your doors, especially in the busy time of the year. My husband and I have had a place down here in Myrtle Beach for a long time, and so I know how busy the streets get during the summer months. And we want to make sure that if you're servicing that many visitors, that you have a stable workforce that's able to do that. Is anybody else on a business side seeing a lot of what Mark was saying, or feeling something unique to your industry?
I'm just curious also to know how many people have a sense within their own companies of what percentage of their workforce is currently taking transit right now. Or if that's something, again, the chamber could work with the business community on to try to get those numbers.
Or how many would, if they knew it
Right,
could be.
existing now, or would if it was available to them, or they knew it was possible.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe a survey needs to be done, area businesses to find that out. Because I think a lot of people don't know that there is an option. And if we had a better idea of what the usage could be, we could better plan for it monetarily.
I think that would be great, because you're in a unique situation where you have a few months of the year that kind of lull down. Although, like we talked about this morning, that's getting less and less. I was traveling this weekend and flew, connected in Atlanta, and flew in here last night, and it's February, and I was on a big Delta plane, and it was sold out. I mean, there wasn't a seat on the plane. So more and more people, February that used to be the down month really isn't the down month anymore. So this is a problem that will continue. Your roads will get more and more congested, just like we're seeing in Charleston. But you're at a good place now, where with some thinking and some planning, you can maybe avoid some of the things that we see happening in Charleston by being on the forefront of getting some of your workers to use public transportation. It saves them money, it's good for the roads, it's good for traffic. I know everybody that lives down here day in and day out would love to see that traffic go down a little bit. Come July and August, right? People are shaking their heads. What are you hearing, because Sarah kind of put this on the platform about workforce housing. If you had to show up your hand, how many think workforce housing is just as critical of an issue to you as public transportation? Yeah, and I really like what you said about the rural areas too. It is hard from an urban setting to talk about the rural areas and how that's going to be funded. But you brought up a very good point. A lot of our workforce, the governor talks about it all the time. We're at 2.6% now here in South Carolina. Basically everybody is working. So now we are reaching out to those rural segments for people who we haven't reached out to in a long time. because we're looking for more and more workers, and how do we get them into our urban areas? So probably something that wasn't looked at a lot when unemployment was high, but now that unemployment is low,
Well, yeah, just kind of along that point, a number of our buses really act as glorified vehicles, getting people out, from inland and to the resorts for employment. PDRTA in Florence and Williamsburg County Transit both have buses that come in. I think PDRTA has 3 or 4, and Williamsburg has 5. Those buses come in and drop off their passengers, and then the drivers park the bus and go work themselves, and then they all get back on the bus and go home. And that's how those operations work. So I know from some of the conversations and work that we've done with Britain Resorts, for instance, that they're always looking for workers, and they buy passes from us and help their employees with the transportation costs and things like that. But it's been a constant fight. It's a constant fight for us too, finding drivers and mechanics and those types of things. So your point about the vocational options for students is something that's important to us, for sure.
and really here in Horry County, I mean, you guys have such great resources. I've been to your school of, it's in academics, AMA. What a phenomenal place. I mean, and you have Horry Georgetown Tech, which are doing great programs to really get a ready workforce. And that's something that, the governor and myself have been screaming from the rooftops from our campaign all the way through, is supporting our technical schools and cultivating that talent and getting people excited about working with their hands again and making it a good thing. A great paying career, very sustainable. And so I think we're doing a good job of turning that around. I think now we're coming up to the next phases in different parts to keep business growing.
Lieutenant Governor, just a point really quickly. Brian, getting back to the service and comparing the buses that you're putting out on the road versus our, I won't say competition, but some cities that we work with. It sounds like the argument you're making from an investment perspective for local and state governments is if you build it, they will come, or if you build it, they will ride. Essentially showing that the more you invest, the more buses you have, the more people that ride them. How is it making that argument, and have you been successful in connecting that argument with other priorities? Because I think every elected official in this room would say that they support public transportation, absolutely, and mass transit, absolutely. It's just that there are also other priorities in a limited budget. So how can you compare those priorities with other priorities that our elected officials are faced with?
Well, the thing that pops into my head after that question is the whole public safety argument. We go head to head with the public safety side of things, especially on ATAX and other things. And I think Mr. Lazarus made a good point. It's like we take a few targets off the road. They're not walking long distances back to where they're staying. You can use the entertainment shuttle, for instance, to avoid driving while under the influence. And so it sort of has a public safety component on the front end. And Mr. Lazarus is right. I mean, with 2 20-passenger vehicles operating 90 days between Memorial Day and Labor Day, they transported 70,000 people last year. So if we put 4 buses out there on that service and maybe made a few tweaks to where they're going, there's no doubt in my mind we could do more than double the ridership. You're doubling the service, but you are going to do more on the ridership because they work together. And so that's where the argument is. There is no formula for determining how much a bus route is going to generate in ridership. If a consultant tells you that they have that formula, they're blowing smoke, where. You really have to put it out there and understand what the travel patterns are, and put it out there and see how it works and tweak it as you move forward. I think one classic example is what do we do about 501? 501, we would, it would be expensive, but we could put rail service out there. But that rail service won't work unless you have good bus service at this location here, where it would probably terminate to get people to where they're actually going. And the same is true on the other side. You need park and ride lots and some bus service to feed the rail line. And so that's a big investment. That's a mouth to feed every year. And that's probably our biggest issue, is that we're a mouth to feed every year, and it's tough for the jurisdictions to set aside the money for us. That's why we need our own dedicated funding. And I don't really care what the revenue source is, I mean, there's lots of options out there. Some systems use sales tax, which is a nice one because it's fed by both tourists and residents. We have an issue where all my funding is based on the backs of residents, and we're funding some services that really cater to the tourists. So you don't have that nexus of the funding and where it's coming from to what you're trying to use it for. Our legislation, the state legislation, calls for using vehicle registration fees it suggests that in the legislation for regional transportation authorities. That's still residential side of the house. So we would, here in Oregon, Georgetown County, we would need something on the tourist side in order to pull off both the 60 bus commuter system and this shuttle program that we could do.
So I think the key to success, and the governor talks about it all the time, right? We have a 6-foot bed and a 4-foot blanket, I'm sure you've all heard him say that, is public-private partnerships. And it works well in a lot of arenas. And it's, Mark, that's what you talked about. It was public-private partnerships. And have we, and Brenda, you might chime in on this, or the chamber, have other industries, maybe like the hospitality industry, that are seeing where they need a lot of service in the public transportation and moving people around. Are they doing things individually that could be stronger if we came together and did something, or if they teamed up with the public transportation and made a much more robust, well thought out, instead of everybody trying to solve this problem on their own, and now we just have a whole lot of people doing individual things where it could really go a lot further if we pulled together. Brenda, or if Myrtle Beach Chamber want to jump in on
I
that?
think from my perspective of the chamber, I think, all roads, sorry for that pun, but all roads do lead back to workforce. So a lot of what we're talking about from a business perspective is we have jobs available, but we don't have enough people to fill them. We need housing, we need the transportation, we need the J1s. It's like a Rubik's Cube. They all need to kind of fit together in this elaborate puzzle. And right now the chamber has relationships like with the Hospitality Association for the J1 program and H-2B visas, but I think there is something interesting in the idea of, we work with SC Works, but is there a way for the chamber and the businesses associated with not just our chamber, but the North Myrtle Beach Chamber, the Loris Chamber, the Amer Chamber, Conway, all of the chambers of the region to be working with, with Coast RTA and SC Works in some fashion. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it seems like most of our waking moments we're dealing with issues that are tied to either lack of workforce or inability to get workforce where we need them, either from a housing standpoint or from getting them to and from where they work.
So would the chamber be a good kind of facilitator of this, to kind of go out and do a survey, kind of like you suggested, with local businesses and find out just how much are you spending, what are you doing, and then maybe bring them all to the table in beautiful areas like this. So they're going to be now your next phase of where they don't feel, safe driving anymore, or don't feel safe driving either early or late in the day, and those are customers too. Like we were saying, they need to get their hair done and go to the grocery store and go to their favorite boutique. They're going to be that next big thing of riders, and that's what we saw in the state symposium, because we had a speaker come in from Houston who talked about that, and how when people feel safe, they will start riding, especially when they don't feel comfortable on the road. And then again, you get into the millennials, and in Greenville, what they have looked at is is children who don't have access to a car, high school workers, which is a workforce. They're trying to create a way where they can get rider passes so that they can come in and work on the weekends. You know, so mom and dad maybe both work or they have flex schedules and they can't get a job because they don't have a means of transportation to get there. So now you're looking at opening up a whole different sector of our workforce and getting them working. And I know, especially down here, because I've heard Mark talk about before, is getting that younger high school group out and working and wanting to work. And part of it is being able to get them to work.
If I just add, Mr. DiSabato, I think it's really exciting that we pulled the Economic Development Corporation into the Transportation Committee, because I'm looking forward to being part of their conversations on where we're citing major employers and being commute options for those types of,
Yeah, no,
implementation.
I'm wondering what component of your, what you're trying to accomplish is going to address the stigma of transportation in this area. I come from a major metropolitan area where there's zero stigma attached to transportation. You know, nobody even thinks about going to work in New York City unless they're getting on a subway or a bus. Now I know that's not here, it's not the same thing, but I would prefer to get on a bus and go to work in the morning than drive by the traffic. I could read a book for 15 minutes and enjoy a cup of coffee on my way to work. But
The answer for us is frequency.
yeah,
So right now, we're really kind of forced towards the coverage side of things. So you're gonna get mostly people who have to use it, they don't have any other option. But if we can start finding some of these corridors where we can put some frequency out there, then we'll get those folks in.
The thing that keeps ringing in my head is something we learned after Hurricane Florence. Mayor Bethune actually asked us to go and run some numbers to take a look at how many people who live in the rural area or Weston Waterway are actually commuting into the city of Myrtle Beach every day for their jobs. Not just hospitality jobs, but jobs in nursing, jobs in professional services, legal. And it was over 55%, I think it was 57% 2 years ago, and I'm sure that number's just growing. And so that just shows you that, again, if it were there, if the coverage were there and the frequency, more and more people would take that as a regular way of getting in and out of the city and back to home.
you mentioned park and ride in connection with rail service. Have you considered park and ride with regard to express bus service and things like that?
It's something that we can look at, and then we can also look at van pool, which is a more intense version of the carpool kind of thing. You need to do the guaranteed ride home portion of it, but that's something, at least on an employer base, those are viable options and tools into the toolbox, if you will.
Hi, my name is Joe Kunkel. I'm with a local nonprofit called Neighbor to Neighbor, and working with volunteer drivers for homebound adults all across the Grand Strand, and we are about to expand into Brunswick, our neighbors to the north. So as you mentioned, seniors, number 2 in the country, sometimes competing with Charleston, number 1, Brunswick's number 9, so a population that we're here to serve, and whether we like it or not. And so I don't really have a solution, but I do want, you had mentioned to us to talk to you about some issues. One of the big issues for my agency is literal volume and the complexity of aging in place, and not just aging in place services, but doing it in a healthy, happy way. And so it's all about how we do transportation access. How do we address the individual needs? Because everybody who has somebody in their family that they have or are caring for, you know how individualized that person is and the needs that they are. We call that person-centered mobility access in Neighbor to Neighbor. And it's one of our strong suits. It's something that we really are proud of. And yet it's something that is so complex sometimes that it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's a lot, 40,000 calls are fielded by our office alone. And we get, on average, working days, over 100 calls are coming in and out of our office. A third of our calls go to voicemail. And you can't just say, hey, what do you need? You need a ride by. It's very conversational. It's more than a ride, what Neighbor to Neighbor is doing. It's providing access. And what, kind of tying it back to the workforce, I'd be really interested to see if it's possible at the chamber level for a survey, would employers and employees feel like a service like Neighbor to Neighbor, COSRTA, as they ramp up some paratransit options, so that there is access, a safety, and being able to allow your loved one, when they have a medical appointment, to be able to have a trusted ally in your corner to say, I don't need to take off work, mom's taken care of. And so we work with many families already on that, but we're 3% of just our area that we're serving. I mean, we've identified over 10,000 people just in our community here that could benefit from neighbor-to-neighbor service. And it's just such a growth that we're experiencing that our volume is overloaded currently. So I just want to bring that issue to your attention, that it's about how we access, how we can provide that aging in place support for our loved ones.
Have you worked with the Department of the Aging at all?
Yes, I actually worked in that office years ago, and had the privilege of working there to really get a bird's eye view on kind of the different transportation access points throughout the state. And it's really reassuring to see this forum here. I'm so glad that this is happening, because it really, someone like me, it's very nerve-wracking talking in front of all of you. So it's just a great opportunity. And so yes, but it's been a while. Again, my little organization, we're chomping at the bit just to meet the current demand of our service, and it's hard for us to sit back and be able to think sometimes. And so this is a great opportunity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for what you do, because it is a huge problem. So I would encourage you, and please reach out to my office to do a connection with our Office of the Aging, because they're tackling, that's kind of what I talked about before, we're all trying to tackle the same problem, but we're doing it in our own lane. And they are doing that every day. So it'd be good to see what you're doing, and maybe you two can collaborate in a way down here off of each other and kind of help each other out and help each other grow. One thing I think that was important, I wrote in my notes to go back to, is the census. Because you were talking about numbers, right? So the governor has asked me to chair the census committee for the 2020 census. And it's something that's really important, and I guess until I did a deep dive into it, I didn't realize just how important it is. South Carolina picked up a House seat in the last census. That's really important. All the money we get from the federal government tied into the census. So we have to get a complete count. And we, in the governor's office, have reached out to every organization. Duke Energy is involved with putting reminders on their envelopes. We need all leaders. You're all in here that are business owners. You have a captive group of people who trust you. And so it is my plea to you to, as this starts coming, April 1st kicks off the census. We really need your help to make sure you're encouraging all of your people. And you play a big part dealing with the aging, right? We're working with people like Meals on Wheels. The two highest groups that are undercounted are children and elderly. And those are the two spaces that usually need the most resources from the government. And I understand it, because when you talk to older people, they're fearful of filling things out, things they don't know, they haven't seen the census in a long time, and we tell them over and over again, if you see something that looks like a piece of mail you're not used to seeing, throw it away. Well, and now we're saying, accept that. Don't throw that away. But this year is going to be different, because there's all kinds of electronic options. You can do it online, you can do it on a mobile device, you can fill it in the old-fashioned way. But we really need to get everybody counted. And I think so many times we have these ideas, and people that are fearful of filling them out, nobody is going to come for you. There's no questions on citizenship. And it's fairly easy form, right? We just want to know, where are you here? On April 1st, if you are living in South Carolina, you need to be counted. And it's just that simple. If you're pregnant on April 1st, but the baby is not here, you do not count that baby yet. If you are living and breathing on April 1st, then that's who you count. Unless you're in an Army base, the Army base counts you. If you're living in student housing on a college campus, the college counts you. So your parents don't have to, which is the only thing that was kind of confusing, because I would have counted my daughter when she was away at school, and son. If you are buying or renting an apartment for your college student, they're supposed to fill out their own, but we're all parents here, most of us, they're not. So just fill them out, I would say. Because, you know, they won't be included in the college's count, but we all have to make sure we get that done. Because that is a huge amount of money that we are turning away for programs like this, for programs for our elderly, for public transportation. Some of the things we're trying to find dollars for will be provided to us. So it is really important that we all collectively reach out to our neighbors, our friends, the people that work for us, our coworkers, and make sure they're filling out that census. So if you can all help me with that, that is a really, it's a powerful thing for our state. Brenda, you had something?
Just, Karen, when we talk about the survey, I think it's important not to only look at the businesses and what their needs are, but one of the things I was gonna mention too was the fact that almost 60% of our workforce does not live within city limits. If we can even find some way to survey those people, whether it's hospital workers, fire, police, teachers, and find out how many of them would use public transportation, that helps, you know, city leaders, county leaders make decisions on budgeting and how to fund something when we have the information at hand to help us make those decisions.
From the state term perspective, whatever we can do to help push that out, I think maybe just to the whole state would be really helpful. The one thing I was gonna bring up that, I lived overseas for a year, and something that I used frequently when I lived overseas was an app where I could see other people who were driving to places that I wanted to go, and I could pay $10 to get in their car, and I could ride with them. I don't think we would get any huge movement on that in America. The carpool or what you know, this is not super, it's not big in America, right? But one of the things that we talked about in Charleston was that they are doing some of that just kind of internally in businesses. They're saying, sign up on this website, and we'll match you with people who have similar routes. And one of the things talking about the security aspect that was really exciting for me, they did this in this app when I lived overseas. You have a female option, where you can say, I'm a woman, I don't want to be in a car with another guy that I don't really know maybe, so you can say, I only want female drivers or only females in the car. So I think always keeping that safety and security thing in mind when you're doing things like this is really important, because if you do feel safe and secure, you're more likely to take that sort of transportation. I always did that, right? I was always like, female drivers only, I don't know these people, I don't speak the language, at least I feel a little bit comfortable if I got my girlfriend sitting next to me. So I thought that was really great feedback from the last thing we had, and would love to see that kind of businesses here, seeing if they can do something like that internally.
Well, I know there's several businesses that are members of the chamber now that have done what Mark was talking about initially. They have just decided for their own workforce. They've got workforce as far north as Tabor City over the state line, and they are literally busing people in as a group every single day in order to maintain the stability of the workforce. So I'm sure they would love better transit options and other ways to eliminate that expense. Is going to be astronomical.
That's actually a great point. So I'm from Edgefield, so the other side of the state border. And one of the things that they've done in North Augusta and Edgefield is they've worked with the state of Georgia in doing funding because if you live in Edgefield, it's like you live in Georgia. If you live in Georgia, you could easily, it's a 20-minute drive. I wonder, are y'all doing stuff here that matching or moving funds from getting people from North Carolina on the border here or vice versa?
Yeah.
We haven't really started anything, but we do preserve some of our urban formula for Brunswick County because they're part of the urbanized area. And they're working on it.
Yeah, that's something that's really cool that we've seen just recently right off the exit my parents live on, is they've done park and ride. The cost is being shared with the state of Georgia because it's such a benefit to both states.
One thing to be cognizant of when developing new technology and software to be used, especially for vulnerable populations like the elderly, is that you want those service dollars and the money that technology can produce to go back into a program that's going to benefit and enhance the programmatic aspects. Again, I come back to that complexity on aging. Sure, it's convenient for you and I to do that, but somebody who's struggling maybe to even see what's on the grocery list, to have a support system in there in place, and that's going to cost extra money. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as new technologies are emerging, that money's coming back into programs that are producing positive, happy, healthy outcomes.
I can say amen. My mother's 91, she turned 91 in October, so she lives with me. And it is, it's things that we take for granted, calling in a prescription, right, and seeing your number. Just the fact that they're not physically talking to somebody, it's not that they can't do it, there's just, they're skeptical. Or is that computer gonna mess it all up and now I'm not gonna get the right medication, right? So you're right, it's with young people it's easy, but when you talk about our aging population, things that are easy for us is not quite so easy for them. So it's a very good point.
I actually wanted to offer kind of an outside perspective. So I work for the chamber. I'm on the board of Coast RTA. I've used Joe, neighbor to neighbor before. I'm disabled and I'll never be able to drive. And I've lived in Myrtle Beach my whole life. So it's been difficult to navigate. Obviously, a lot of the time I've been really blessed with a lot of friends and coworkers who are willing to give me transportation. But I take MBA classes at night and public transit doesn't run at night, and it's a $40 Uber home every time that I want to go to class, on top of the tuition I'm already paying.
Yeah.
So obviously I feel it's important to concentrate on getting people to work and workforce, but there are also extracurricular things that I can't just go to work and go home. It's not a quality of life, obviously, and I won't gain any improvement or any learning by just doing that. So in addition to concentrating on workforce and getting people into work, I also think that the conversation needs to extend into extracurricular. And Joe's done a great job with neighbor to neighbor, getting elderly out and being able to go play bridge or go get their hair done. But for younger people like myself, there aren't many options. And I have used paratransit before with Brian, but sometimes things come up and you can't schedule in advance. Finding out about a fundraiser the day before or a volunteer event that someone tells me about the next day. Unless I contact that person or spend a good hour of my time trying to contact people to give me a ride, there aren't many options for things like that. So just an outside perspective, not from a business standpoint, but just from someone who is affected also.
Well, I think that brings up a great point, and it's being able to get people out of their homes, right, and becoming active citizens within the community. Like we talked about, how many of his workers, who's gonna be the buy-in, that's probably something, we probably haven't even tapped altogether, is how many people who have some form of disability would end up coming out and, really, if, spending dollars and walking around and just being an engaged member of a community is huge, and it's huge for their mental health, right? Their mental and physical health by connecting with other people. There's so many of these things that tie together like a web. I mean, we were very careful in Charleston to not bring workforce housing too much in it, because these are both very big problems, and when you try to bring them together, it almost seems too hard to tackle. But that's why our healthcare providers were brought into that initial meeting, because that's what they're seeing, is that if we want to keep people healthy, we have to get them to the doctor. We have to be able to get them to their appointments. And when it becomes too hard to do that, people give up. And so then we end up with the other side of it. Like, you can put money on the front end, and it's what you're seeing today with education and the governor really championing 4K education, because the amount of money it takes to get involved on the front end, it is a fraction of the amount it is to be on the back end and to be solving a problem that you could have solved a lot easier. So that is why we had our medical community kind of in that too, to say, what are you seeing? And with disabilities, making sure that public transportation has the right buses. Right. They have lifts on them, that the bus stops are made to, not have a curb, because if somebody's in a wheelchair and they need to get somewhere, they have to be able to get down and to get their wheelchair to the bus. And so it really does take an entire community to make sure that these things work well, and getting everybody at the table. But I want to thank you all, because the first step is coming out and everybody talking together to figure out what all the problems are. So thank you for that, because that all needs to be part of the conversation. Because what you want to do is, we're moving forward, we want to make sure that we're tackling things for everyone, right? That we're not just focused on one group. So I appreciate your question. How are we bringing all pieces, how are we bringing everybody in the community into this? It's very, very important to do that on the front end. And so, anybody else have anything to add or talk about? I want to be very conscious of everybody's time because I know it's very precious, especially on a Monday morning. So I want to thank you all for coming, for being part of the discussion. Thank you to the chamber. I know we probably just gave you a whole bunch of task items to now run with, which is always fun, right? They won't be inviting me back. The chamber really never came back anymore. Now I have weeks of work. But I think this is good. And I want everybody to, I want to be very clear that I am all about the long picture range. You know, light rail and connecting rail, I mean, that's amazing. That's the way of the future. But we can't just focus on that and not look at the problems of today. And I think there's so many things we can do by coming to the table and collaborating that will solve a lot of immediate problems, or at least make them easier for people, right? If we can all sit and talk about it and collaborate together. And that's what this is doing, is getting everybody at the table. So thank you for being a participant at the table. I so appreciate everything you do for Myrtle Beach. This is such an important part of our state. This is where people come. This is when you talk about South Carolina, it's probably one of the places that people say the most. Have you ever been to Myrtle Beach? So thank you for what you do. Myrtle Beach, you represent our state really well. Thank you all for coming out, and always know you can reach out to my office with any more questions or concerns.
Of course, we want to thank Lieutenant Governor Evette for being here this morning, Sarah Cohen from the South Carolina Chamber, Brian from Coast RTA, our mayor. We also had Councilman John Crutch join us this morning, as well as Councilman Dennis DiSabato from County Council. So thank you for joining in the conversation as well. And thanks everybody for being here. And it sounds like, yes, indeed, we have more work to do. That's good. That's what this was all designed to do, is actually continue the conversation and get some ideas flowing. And so there'll be more conversation where we'll probably reach out to many of you to get ideas and input on what that survey questionnaire looks like, to get that out into the community. And hopefully we can reconvene and continue to work towards solving some of the issues and barriers, and also tackle some of the opportunities that were discussed this morning. So thank you once again for being here on behalf of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber and everyone in the community. Thank you to the city of Myrtle Beach for allowing us to always hold amazing events here in the beautiful train depot. We love being here. Have a great Monday, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.